Hey, what's up, class? All right, so I wanted to talk about the writing, coming up with the story or a story, the ideation. Um, on the upper film industry level, let's say if you are a major studio, your budget concerns are radically different. Let's say, for example, Skydance Studios, one of the big studios out there right now, and they do Tom Cruise hits. So they're not really sort of looking at the budget in the same way as, let's say, a small studio is looking at a budget, or let's say an independent filmmaker like yourself. Okay, they're not worried about locations, costs. You know, if they have Tom Cruise, they can get the money. But at this level, you have to really think about what locations, what resources are at your dispense. So you have to think, let's say for locations, you definitely cannot shoot in LAX, like I mentioned before. But you can shoot on campus. You may be able to shoot even on the weekends, maybe if you get permission on campus. You'd have to check to see. So you can shoot at home for free, all day, all night, if necessary. So those type of resources you got. There are parks that you can shoot at within reason as a film student. You know, no, I don't think the police are going to stop you for shooting something and saying, hey, it's my class project. They're not going to do that. But if I show up with a huge crew, you know, and a couple of trucks, yeah, they're going to stop and ask for permits. So that's also something to keep in mind. Do we have to get permits for specific locations? Once upon a time, students could shoot without permits, but that's not the case anymore. So those things you have to think about. So now you've narrowed down to locations you can have unfettered access to 100%, no problem. Okay, now we got to think, what type of conflict can take place in this location? You know, what kind of movie, what kind of story can I tell? What genre do I like? Is it love story, romantic? Is it a comedy? Is it drama? What? Science fiction? What kind of story am I going to tell? Okay. And then again, you have to think budget, because if you shoot a scene and let's say, for example, if you write a scene where, you know, there's a prep rally going on, right? And you need a gym full of students. Well, yeah, you got a problem, because now you got to fill a gym with students to get your shot. So, you know, but maybe you can get 3 or 4 students and, you know, cheat it as if they're backstage at a prom rally, or the prom rally's taking place inside and they're like getting ready to go on stage and have some sort of conflict. So you got to think these things out, and let that inform the narrative, the story, as you start to shape this idea of what I want to shoot. So once we've got that narrowed down, that pretty much dictates the scope of the story. You know, like if we don't have a budget to, let's say, you know, rain down a fleet of alien ships and devastate the football field, right? But, you know, maybe we have enough resources to tell the story of like some sort of supernatural event happening to a football player, something small or something, I don't know. So that's the idea process. And what you do is you keep writing down your ideas. You know, you don't sort of settle on the first one. You got to come up with like 20 to 40 of them and then go with the best one out of that. Okay. And that 20 to 40 theme, that 20 to 40 ratio number is what you're going to shoot for pretty much as a writer. Meaning, for every idea, even within the context of the story, like the location, and you want to, don't settle on the first idea that pops into mind. Come up with 20 ideas, 40 ideas. And then from that pool, you choose the best one, okay? So that's what you sort of want to do with the writing. And then, once you have that settled, you have to get your characters. You give them a life. You have to write backstory about the characters. You got to go back as far as possible. I usually go back to the great-great-grandparents and work my way up. Or I should say, I have gone that far back. And I find that when I do, I have a greater success in fleshing out a character. Because subconsciously, you have to sort of trick your own mind as a writer into believing that these characters really do exist. And extrapolate from your imagination the relevant details of the moment that builds the idea in the mind of the audience that you want to put in their mind. For example, if you want them to think that your character is hungry, how are you going to visually put that idea that, you know, your character Tom is hungry in their mind without Tom saying, gee whiz, I'm hungry? All right, how do you do that and do it believably? So that's where the backstory comes in. Also, we've all heard of what's called writer's block, okay? And what writer's block is, you just get to a certain point and you're out of ideas. So if you do enough backstory, plenty and plenty of backstory, then when writer's block occurs, there's a wasp floating around here. When writer's block occurs, you have a bunch of information about your character's history to pull from for inspiration, okay? And then you go back to the drawing board, you go back to your outline and figure out, okay, where did I go wrong? So you'll have on one hand your outline of your, and I'll get to that, of your movie, and your backstory, and you can look at the two to figure out, okay, where did I go wrong? How did I write myself into this corner where I'm stuck? Okay, that's where the backstory comes in. Once you've written the backstory and you sort of have a sense of what you want this story to be about, the genre, who the characters are, what's the main conflict, you can answer those 6 relevant questions I gave you. You've sat down with someone and you've sort of, giving them this rough scope of, someone who's going to give you some critical feedback, right? Now your next step is to outline what happens, what in the scope of all the infinite possibilities of how this person's day can go, all the events and moments, your job is to distill it down to the relevant moments that gives the audience a sense of who this character is, what their regular life is like, right? And all of that in perspective to the event that's about to happen, okay? So you got to show us the calm before the storm. Show us how this This is it. This is how his day goes. This is the norm. Okay, that's Act 1, and you have to establish that right away. And choose those characteristics wisely. Choose the ones that build the narrative. If your character likes flying kites, right? And let's say this story has absolutely nothing to do with kites. Let's say your story takes place indoors, then maybe you might want to leave the kites out of it. But let's say if it takes place on the beach like this, you might want to bring the kites into it. Makes sense, right? So you choose those characteristics of your character that are relevant to your story location, okay? Then you have what's called the inciting incident. And that's an event that takes place and it turns your character's life completely upside down, okay? It usurps the norms of their world, completely, utterly just completely turns it upside down. And now your character, our protagonist, has to figure out, how do I fix this? Okay. And again, the writer's challenge is to show this, right? To show it using pre-linguistic language, using imagery, show what the character wants, what the character needs to do to write this incident, this event. Does the character need to defeat some, supervillain? Does the character need to, prevent a cart from rolling down a hill before it smashes into a fruit stand and injures an old lady? What does your character need to do? You can't show us. I'm sorry, you can't tell us. You can't say, I should say, you can have your character say, oh, I need to go stop that cart before it hits, the old lady. But that's not exciting, okay? You have to remember the pre-linguistic language. Show us. Show the cart rolling down the hill. Show the old lady down in the pathway, and show your character looking up and seeing the cart, seeing the old lady, and springing into action, right? Show, don't tell. That's the challenge. So then, once that's done, scene by scene, shot by shot, beat by beat, okay, the director has to come in and take that script and marry it to visuals, okay? Well, a lot of people think, well, what do you mean marry it to visuals? He takes the script, or she takes the script, and if it's well written, the writer has made very little reference to camera. He doesn't say wide shot on the street, he just says a street full of people, watching astoundment as a cart, goes barreling down the hill. That evokes a wide shot, maybe a medium shot of people's faces, as the cart goes by. Maybe even someone reaches for it and can't get it as it goes flying by, okay? But the writer doesn't say close up on hand, as, it just doesn't read well. So that's the director's job. The writer does not direct the movie on the page. That's the director's job. The director comes in and has to visualize how they're going to execute this. Okay, and that's what they put in the storyboards, right? So, back up a little bit to the writing. The beats, the scenes, sequences, and acts. Okay, a screenplay is broken down into different units. The largest unit is the entire story. The smallest one, or the next largest, would be the acts. Usually there's 3 acts or more. It could be 5, 6. Then there are sequences. You have a series of 3 to 4 sequences that make up an act. Within your sequences, there are scenes, right? And then within the scenes, there is beats, or I should say there are beats. Okay? Now a beat isn't the same sense of when a director is talking to an actor and says, I want you to say it, and then pause a beat and then go forward. That's different. A beat is the turning dynamic in the script that goes from positive to negative, negative to positive. For example, you have a conversation between a couple, and let's say it's morning, and the husband gets up and he goes to brush his teeth, right? He's first, the wife is still kind of stirring in bed when he comes out, and he says, good morning, love. And she's like, good morning. And he gives her a kiss on the cheek, and she kind of, rubs her eyes and goes into the room. He goes into the closet. She notices he left the seat up on the toilet again. And he may give her a compliment. Let's say, oh, honey, that movie sure was great last night. That was a good suggestion. Wow. And instantly she says, damn it, I'm tired of you leaving this seat up on the toilet. How many times I got to tell you, this is irritating, all right? At that moment, the dynamic in the conversation has changed. It went from a positive, everything is fine and dandy, to a negative. Oh, snap. He left the toilet seat up. That's a beat. The dynamic in the conversation between the characters in that scene changes from a positive to a negative, or a negative to a positive. Okay? It never stays the same. If it stays the same, it has no place, no purpose, no business being in your script. Everything that you write has to go from a positive to a negative, or a negative to a positive. It doesn't matter. You have to, if you can get that part in your head, right? That's what the filmmaking is about. Changes. That's what life is about. That's what people perk up. If everything is the same, like this beach, we're relaxed. But if all of a sudden there's all sorts of changes going on, ships sailing in, bombs going off, and, crowds of people, it changes the dynamic, okay? So get that in your head. It's about going from positive to negative, or negative to positive, beat by beat, okay? Now the beats, you can have 5 to 7 beats, and that builds a scene. And that scene has to go from a positive to a negative, or a negative to positive. At the beginning, it's positive, then at the end, it's negative, okay? If it's negative at the beginning, then it has to be positive at the end of the scene, okay? You get 3 to 5 scenes, right? And those scenes together function as a sequence. And that sequence has to follow the same structure. Positive at the beginning of the sequence, negative at the end of the sequence. Okay? It can never be the same at the beginning and at the end. Otherwise, it falls dead on its face. Okay? And as you're bouncing this story dynamic from positive to negative to positive to negative, the stakes are getting higher and higher and higher. Like, for example, it may start out as an argument about, him leaving the toilet up. But then it gets to the car and escalates to an affair that he had 10 years ago, maybe. Or maybe, someone he slept with in college. I don't know. And then maybe he snaps back. Well, you slept with such and such. The drummer in my band. Right? Ooh, not the drummer in the band. Sorry. And then by the end of the drive, by the time they get to work, she pulls the car over in anger and a fit and says, it's over, we're getting a divorce. Right? That's gone from a positive, good morning, to extreme negative. Right? So we tune in and perk up to see. The human mind wonders, does this character have the energy needed to bring order back to these circumstances. All right, the forces of the of the universe has broken down in this situation. Can our protagonists muster up the energy to bring order to this chaos? That's what we're tuning into. That's the big question here, which translates basically into what happens next. What are they going to do? Okay, so you have to keep that question going, and it's through that dynamic of positive to negative to positive to negative. They get closer to the goal, then they get further away from the goal, then they get closer to the goal, and they get further away until ultimately they're the furthest away possible. They've done everything that they can possibly do. They've exhausted everything. They're at their wits' end. They have no more energy, no more strength. It's the final, the sun is going down, the clock is ticking, the bomb is about to explode. It's the 11th hour. You know, the teacher has the test and is about to pass it out. And from nowhere, something happens. Something unthought of, something remembered, something hidden. And that saves the day. That gives our character the resources, the energy, the way out of this. Or not. It's up to you. Okay? So, that's the writer's job. Now the director comes in and takes this and has to plot this on a chart. And he plots the high moments or emotional intensity and the low ones, you know? And if the writer's done a good job, it'll start off like down here, and as it progresses, it gets higher, and then it goes down, and then it gets higher, and it goes down, and then it gets really high, and then comes down. Okay, that's what you want. So now the director has to think visually within the context of that rising and falling tension. When the action rises, he turns to the principle of contrast, meaning he makes everything on the screen from shot to shot change as much as possible. And that creates a visual intensity in the audience, that changing of all the rules of what we see, okay? He may go from a static shot where the camera is not moving to a shot where it's handheld. He may go back to a wide shot and then go into an extreme close-up of an eye, and then back to a super wide, and then to a close-up of the gun, and then back to, you know, right? Or let's say if it's down at the plateau, the bottom, where the emotional intensity isn't as intense, he may just keep it 2 static shots. You know, one shot of her saying her lines and another shot of him saying his lines, and just nothing, just plain nothing but performance. And save the action later for when the intensity rises, okay? So they'll save the contrast for those moments in the script that's called for the most action, the most emotional intensity, okay? And then the director plots this out using a visual system. They determine at hand, they think, okay, what do I have at my disposal? If it's the location, what are the colors, the lines? What are the qualities of the location? What's the lighting like there? What's the sound like? What can I use to tell this story visually? How? All I have is color, movement, tone, tempo, or I should say rhythm, all right? Space, line, and shape. Those 7 things. Of those 7 things, which one can I extrapolate the best from this location with this budget and tell this story visually? Is it going to be colors? Maybe the place has a specific color palette, you know? Will it be colors? Maybe the space has a specific linear motif. Then I can use lines. You know, maybe the place has a bunch of frames, squares, round shapes. Maybe I can use shapes. The director has to determine this. And as the movie goes through the process, the movie moves forward, the script, I say, as he moves or she moves through the script, you predetermine using the storyboards how you're going to use the specific component that you choose through the story to build tension. Okay, that's what you use with the storyboard. That's the director's job. Once the director has done this from page 0 to the end, right, then it gets dispersed through the crew. The crew breaks it down, shot by shot, what they need, right? The producer coordinates this, budgets, schedules, everything, checks, double checks, triple checks, quadruple checks, checks again, checks the check after they check the check, so that when that time comes and all those resources are needed on set, everything is there. There is no announcement over the walkie-talkie saying, hold for the lights because it's on the way and it's stuck in traffic. No, everything has to be there. If the set has to stop, if the production has to stop for a technical, and it happens, it's inevitable, but the more it happens, you break the momentum of the progress. The director establishes a pace, and then the actors sort of settle into this pace. And now they can concentrate on really breathing life into this character, into this moment. And if the production has to consistently stop because of scheduling or technical issues, then it breaks that actor's momentum. It breaks the director's momentum. And it could sabotage the production. You know, if it's hour after hour, shot after shot. What? Oh, something else? Oh, what is it this time? What? Oh, no gas for the generator. Oh, come on. What? No generator? How could you not have a generator? We've known for 3 weeks we're going to be shooting at nighttime exterior with this light. No generator. So it kind of erodes that trust in the whole production. You know, from the top down, all the way down to the actors, even the crew. You know, the crew starts to lose confidence in the director and the producer's ability to deliver this vision. So you create, you envision, you plan, and then you safely execute on set. And then you go into post-production. All right. I'll see you on the next video.